Hi everyone, Ahmad Sadiq with Land Trust Title of Central Florida. Let's talk title. Today we're going to talk about another important component of the title process. After we've ordered our title search, we're also going to take a look to see if we need to order an HOA or a Condo Association Estoppel. This is going to give us a few bits of information that are very important to our transaction. So first, it's going to give us information about what the payments are that the buyer is going to have to make. Moving forward, a lot of times associations are going to ask us to pre-collect a certain set amount. So it could be 1 or 2 installment periods, whether that's monthly, quarterly, or annually. The association may ask us to pre-collect these amounts, so we want to make sure that at the time the transaction closes, the proper amount is being sent over to the association so that we're making the buyer in compliance with the HOA bylaws, the Condo Association bylaws, and make sure that there's no issues for them once they've moved into the property. We also want to make sure that the seller is not back due on any of their payments. This is really important because we want to make sure that we collect those amounts, and we also want to ensure that the account for that seller's property is not with an attorney, because if it is, then there's chances that there's additional attorney's fees and interest and other fees that have accumulated, and we want to make sure that we collect everything that we need to so that once the transaction closes, the buyer takes the property free and clear of any issues related to the association. They're basically starting fresh at that point. We're also going to make sure that the buyer doesn't have to go through any kind of an approval process. In some circumstances, a homeowners association or a condo association are going to require the buyer to put in an application and go through an approval process, and in some instances we'll have to provide different types of information so that by the time the transaction closes, the buyer is approved. If we don't do this, this can become an issue for the buyer. So our HOA estoppel or condo estoppel will tell us if there is a buyer approval process, and then if there is, at that point it can be disclosed to the buyer, and then the buyer and the buyer's agent can work on following through with all of the requirements that the association is providing to them, submitting whatever documentation and filling out any relevant applications that are associated with that process to get approved for the association. And then we also want to make sure that there's no capital contribution fee. In some instances, an association will require that there's a capital contribution that's paid. That's generally going to be coming from the buyer. That's generally the way it's set up with condo and homeowners associations. That amount has to be pre-collected and paid at the time of closing. And then in some instances, the association may require a resale or deed transaction. So this is a per transaction fee that is charged to the seller of the property, and we will get all of this information on the HOA or the condo estoppel, and basically it gives us an outline of all of the things that we need to look for, and take care of by the time closing is done, so that all the relevant fees are paid, so that the buyer moves into the property but without having any back due amounts or any on the account associated with the property, and also to make sure that there's no issues left over from when the seller was there. Lastly, we want to make sure that the property doesn't have any violations. So this could be anything from leaving trash cans on the curb to the house is painted an unapproved color, or there's some other work that was done that wasn't approved by the ARC of the association. And if there is, then we need to make sure that the proper approval happens so that once the buyer takes possession of the property itself doesn't have any kind of violations associated with it. And again, the buyer is starting fresh, and then they take over responsibility at that point without having to deal with any issues from the past. Again, guys, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to talking to you next time.